welcome back to the What the Falk Sunderland review show. Sunderland slipped to a third defeat in 5 as Tony Mowbray's side slipped to a 2-1 defeat at relegation threatened Stoke City, and all in all, it's not been that great of a weekend, if we're completely and utterly honest. As is standard when we get beat, there's only one man to join me this week. How are you, Dave? You all right?
Yeah, very well, mate. We'll pick the bones out of this. I think probably stuff that we say every time we get beat, but hopefully there's a bounce back. We haven't got a boring international break to put up with this time to put it right. So, although maybe we could do with the international break, because I don't think Tuesday is going to be pretty, is it?
No. And we'll get on to Leicester. We're going to do a bit of a preview on this one because we don't normally do the previews of the midweek games, but why not? We don't want to labour too much on Dr. Evil beating Sunderland again. But we're like 24 hours later. We're actually recorded a little bit later than we probably ever have, Dave. So we've had that 24 hours proper 24 hours to digest it. How are you feeling after 2-1 loss to Stoke?
Mate, let's be honest. I think 90% of Sunderland's fan base, just to pluck a percentage out the air, absolutely despise Alex Neil. And while I am very disappointed in him and the way that I'm that parent, and I'm not angry with you. I'm just disappointed. He's a clever football manager, especially in games like this. We've seen it before. I really, really enjoyed his management style when we played Sheff Wed in the second leg playoff semi-final. He knew exactly how the game was going. He knew that we went 1-0 down, but he also knew that we'd still have a chance in us. And obviously, we all know how that panned out. And I just think he's very astute. I think it's a very good word for him. Listen, Sunderland have got, there's the first listen of the day. Sunderland have got a very, very soft underbelly. We play a very attractive football. We're very good at it. But when things get a little bit rough and tumble, when the man in the middle doesn't have the greatest game of his life, I'm not sure I've seen a man in the middle have a good day recently. It all contrives to go against you. And that's what yesterday was. We can't dwell on it, but we've suddenly gone, and it is amazing how fickle football is, but we've suddenly gone from 1 defeat in 5 to now 3 defeats in 5, and it just looks a little bit different, and it takes a bit of a turn, and it's a shame. I think we were just talking before, weren't we? I think we missed a bit of experience. Jesus Christ, when was the last time Corey Evans played a football game? You'd like to think we'd have addressed that. Few people whinging on X, formerly known as Twitter, yesterday of 3 centre forwards on the bench and not one of them coming on until 70 minutes or whatever it was. Frustrating. I think that's what we always say, isn't it? Every time we get beat, we say we're frustrated. And unfortunately, it could be a long week of frustrations because, as you said, we'll talk about Leicester later, but they are way above anything else in this league, I think, and we'll see how we get on.
I think undoubtedly, the ambition this season, I think minimum would be to have a real good stab at the playoffs based on last season. I think the optimistic ones among us, including ourselves, said we fancied automatic if we really went for it. And we're just looking at the table there, and I think, there's been a few games when we've came on this season and we've lost. And we've discussed how it's kind of not been. I mean, I thought we deserved a draw yesterday, if I'm honest with you. There's been a few games where I could say exactly the same, but I'm looking at the league table and you've got a top 6 there. Leicester have won 11, drew none and lost 1. They've won the league as far as I'm concerned. They're 11 points ahead of Leeds. Ipswich have won 9, they've drew 1, they've lost 1. But then you look at Leeds, who are in 3rd, 6 points behind Ipswich. They've won 6, they have lost 2. But they've drawn 4 of those games. Now, they're only actually 3 points ahead of us, but those 3 points are big. And then you look at Sunderland's run, we've won exactly the same amount of games, but we've lost 5 and we've only drew the 1. Is it a bit of a worry that in these tight games, we can't seem to at least sneak a draw when we're not firing on all cylinders, which you can never expect to be, especially with a young team?
Yeah, frustrating, because I think if you listen back to last the end of last season, possibly even the season review, we said if next year we can turn our draws into wins, and if we can turn our losses into draws and become a little bit more experienced together as a group and stuff like that, then it'll stand us in good stead. And yeah, it does appear as though the same frustrations are coming. But yeah, the same frustrations seem to be there. But is that a case of what we've been saying for a while? And for as much as we can be very positive about the model, and I'm not trying to turn it into a tit for tat, there has been glaringly obvious pieces of the jigsaw missing, and they're still missing, aren't they? And we can say about, like I've already said about Corey Evans coming back. If you go back to it, would a Danny Bart have stood up well in that game yesterday? I think he probably would have. And I'm not trying to get hung up on former glories or anything like that. But is it a game to play two really expansive ball playing centre halves? Maybe it's not, and it might be a little bit nicer to have someone there as an option to change it. That's something we don't have, and that's a bit frustrating, really, I think.
You could even look at, I know I haven't seen much of him. I don't know much of him, but every time I've seen that Jensen Seelt just walking in the ground in that, he's massive. And I wonder if he might have been maybe a slightly better option when you could quite clearly see it wasn't working massively. To go maybe a back three and have O'Nien as your left-hand side. But I don't know. It's all hindsight and it's all wonderful, isn't it? I probably wouldn't have changed the team beforehand. I probably would have had Ballard and O'Nien starting the game before the game. And it's easy for me to say, well, maybe I would have done X, Y, and Z afterwards. But I think a lot of the time when we talk about the games that we've won, we come on and we talk about how good it's been because the lads are so fearless and they play such nice football and we look so good when we're going forward. And that doesn't really change even when we lose, in terms of we do look good going forward. We just haven't got the goal. But when we do lose, it does come down to that little bit of we missed this little bit of experience here and there. Are we just kind of at a point now where we maybe need to accept that that's how Sunderland's going to be, and we're going to get frustrated some weeks when we get dicked off a team like Stoke, who are actually, I know Stoke fans aren't going to like this, but there's a reason that they're 20th or whatever in the table. They're not that good, and they're certainly not good to watch. But do we just need to get used to the fact that sometimes that's going to happen? That's the model we've got, and whether we like it or not, the experience and the nous is not always going to be there because we're trying to get this experience into these young players nice and early. So in 2 or 3 years' time, it's not going to be a problem.
Yeah, there is that argument, and I'm sure that's probably what's said behind closed doors, isn't it? And fair play. It depends what your ambition is, I suppose, isn't it? There's going to be without thinking about it too much now, we can probably name 5 teams where you're going to get that game. That's 10 fixtures throughout the season, and that's picking 5 teams. So you're going to go a QPR, you're going to go a Stoke, you're going to go a Huddersfield, you're going to go a Cardiff, a Rotherham. There's 5 without even thinking, who probably know their own limitations. They probably know their own aspirations and realise that we have a bit of a soft underbelly. If they close up shop, if they kick us a little bit, if they do this, masters of the dark arts, I think they used to call it, for the old Italy team, and Italy have won major championships through doing it before. At what point do we sit there and go, right, this has happened? So if I'm talking 10 fixtures there, they already had 10 fixtures out of last season. So you're suddenly getting on for 20 games out of what 86 over 2 years. That's getting on for a quarter of your games. You've kind of, I suppose at some point you've got to stop making excuses, don't you? Because we are going to have to play a percentage of our games against teams like that. And how long do we put up with it for? I guess, again, it depends what your aspirations are for the season. But if you want to go, Luton did a job at us, didn't they, at Kenilworth Road? And that's the reason that we're not potentially playing in the Premier League, because they did a job on us. That day, Jesus, Luton did that much of a job that we sat there after and went, yeah, we didn't have a sniff. We just didn't. The pitch was too tight. we couldn't get out of our own half, blah, blah, blah. Everything we threw at them and it just didn't work. Yeah, it's the word I keep using. It seems to be the word that I've used for the last 3 seasons. When we get beat, it just becomes frustrating.
I think the reason I asked that in a really long-winded way was I put down, one of the questions was what do you put the defeat down to? But I feel like whenever we're having the conversation about a defeat, Cardiff a few weeks ago, Middlesbrough last week, you kind of point to the fact that, you know, when we're not firing on all cylinders and like being brilliant going forward, or we can't quite get that goal, the experience kicks us in the balls a little bit. Like the experience not to be able to kind of maybe sit in a bit and hold and not let our heads drop last week against Borough. The ability to understand that Cardiff dropped really, really deep and that we had to try something different to get around the back of them the other week. And then, you know, they score that goal later on. Yesterday was just a bit about Stoke being a little bit more streetwise. And look, the first goal's a handball. I'm not even going to go into referees because it just is. Like, I can't be bothered to go on about it again this week. It's a handball. But it all seems like every time we do lose, it does kind of stem back a little bit to, it's just a little bit of inexperience. And I think almost like, do I now have to be content with like the positives that I'm finding from Sunderland when there is a bit of negative and we do lose? Is that what it's just down to? Like, I mean, we talked about that Cardiff game. It was probably Trey Hume's inexperience of not putting the ball out for a throw and trying to be a bit clever and pass it back to Pato, or giving away a corner we concede from the corner. And I just think a lot of it comes down to that little bit of like a nous in the middle. Maybe a Corey Evans type. He's going to be the new buzzwords, I think, on the show. But that kind of player. And I think maybe there's no point in talking about remedying it because it's not going to remedy. That's not the way Sunderland do it. And I suppose we just have to crack onto it. But I think one thing that got a lot of people, I asked for listener questions, and we're going to do mainly listener questions this week before we go into a little bit of a preview of the Leicester game. But one question that a lot of people have asked is the really obvious one. Mowbray spent a lot of time last year complaining about like that lack of striker, saying that he felt like we didn't have all the tools to win games. He even said at the start of the season. He's now got 3, a variation of them. He's got Burster, who's big and strong and can hold the ball up. He's got Hamir, who's a bit raw but can like win balls in the air. And you've got like a little tricky one that can go on the shoulder and Rusin. Stoss them all on the bench and put Pritchard up front. Why do you think he's done that?
I wish I knew. It has to be more to do with the other 3 of them, and maybe we're being a bit hypocritical in the fact that Pritchard's the experienced one. However, Pritchard isn't an experienced centre forward, so that counteracts that argument. We've seen enough times with things like that it just wastes someone like Pritchard and then almost becomes a waste of a shirt. At least if you had a Burstow up there, he seems to favour him over Hamir, and that's fair enough. But if you had a Hamir up there yesterday, you would think that, listen, lads, just even if you only give me 45 minutes of running their 2 centre-halves ragged and pinning up against them and tire them out a little bit, and then we can maybe bring a Royson on and try and get through that way. Yeah, it seemed really peculiar to me. And we'd said a bit last year when people were out injured and people were covering in there. It almost tells those 3 on the bench that you don't trust them enough to play in certain games. That can't be good for them. And yeah, Pritchard, we'll know he'll run his heart out, but he's not the quickest. He hasn't got the best stamina in the world. It's a thankless job up there when you're a centre forward and you've got a bit of body strength about you, let alone when you're the type of player that Pritch is. So yeah, very strange, very peculiar. And ultimately, when things like that don't work out, you have to answer the questions. And I think there is a big question mark over that, to be fair. I
think like even like the last half an hour, or whenever the strikers came on, because he brought on Rusin, Burstow and Dak all at the same time. Look, I'm not going to hammer him too much, but like Bradley Dak put in an absolutely horrific performance yesterday. He looked so off the pace. It was untrue. that might just be down to fitness. He was looking all right before he got injured, so I'm not going to hold it against him too much. But the fact that like it almost felt like we were playing with like a man off up front, the fact that we had Burstow just holding stuff a bit, and then when Hamir came on, like I say, we probably deserved a draw yesterday. We've hit the post from a free kick, which was ironically from Bradley Dack, and Ballard then has hit the post, and Clarkie's had a few chances. Like Rusin's looking like sharp and stuff, but I think it like proved that like when you've got something to hit up front, and someone that's playing the role of a striker, like you see other players come into it. Even if Dack, who was basically the Pritchard replacement, wasn't even firing on all cylinders. And I do agree with you on Pritchard. I think Pritchard's massive to us. Like I'm a real big fan of Alex Pritchard. I think he helps us press a lot more from the top. He is an excellent number 10. I think he's one of our most creative. I do think, and I thought about this bit yesterday, look, I absolutely love Patrick Robertson. I like adore him. But that assist and goals column doesn't seem to be getting any better, whereas Pritchard's, for me, always looks like he's more likely to pull off an assist. But when he plays as the false nine, he doesn't look like scoring, and he looks a bit lost a little bit because it's not his position. So I don't know, before we move into listener questions, do you think it's when he's doing stuff like this, am I being a bit cynical here, but is Mowbray sending a message to say like, I need an experienced centre forward? Or am I just being cynical here?
We've asked the same question at the beginning of the season before we got Royston in, didn't we? We said, like, is he not playing Hamir for that exact reason, to try and send a message? I think if he has been playing those games, and if he consistently tries to play those games, I think there's only going to be one winner, and unfortunately, it's not going to be him, because what they'll do is they'll find somebody who will work with what they've got, who will try and find different answers to the puzzle. And you've got to give him some credit. He played a big chunk of last season without a centre forward and still got us to where we got to. But then it did become a bit of a one-trick pony in certain games, and certainly in the semi-final down at Kenilworth Road. He's going to have to start adding a few more strings to his bow. There is starting to be murmurs of, is he that much of a one-trick pony that he's not going to take us as far as the Premier League? Yeah, if that's the case, it's you don't want to talk about change of manager, and I'm not suggesting that we should, but that's what he's got. He's now got 3, and that's going to be Speakman's answer to him, isn't it? You wanted centre forwards, you've now got 3 of them. We've got you, Job, who we think is just an excellent athlete and can play anywhere. You need to start working out the problems now and start giving us answers. If you can't, we'll have to find someone else.
Yeah, I don't think he's helped himself by not playing any strikers yesterday. I really don't. We've spoke a lot about like the going forward and the inexperience and stuff like that. One thing that we probably haven't touched on in this, but I've said it now, so here we go. Clean sheets, 4 and 12, conceded 6 in the last 2. Okay, look, 2 games before that, I think we kept 2 clean sheets, so you could say we've had 2 clean sheets in the last 4, so we're getting there. But I think O'Nine's played quite well this season. I think Ballard's been absolutely superb all season, but when goals are getting conceded, there was a bit of a worry there. How do we improve that? If you have the answer, I suppose that's we've got the new manager, I guess. Like, but how would you improve it if you could?
Yeah, I unfortunately think the majority of our problems come from that lack of experience and just being naive at times, like you'd said about Tri-Hume before. And certain things are just avoidable. I mean, we can say that yesterday it was handball, and you're right, it was, undoubtedly it was. But right back, are they 5 yards away from the play? Should they be tighter in before he gets the chance to? Well, if you're breaking it down as a coach, if my right back did that, I'd be fuming. I'd be like, yes, okay, it's handball. However, you've still got to do your job. You've still got to do your job, and I think he was 5 yards out of position, to be fair. Yeah, I just think if you've got a centre midfielder there who's got a bit of nous, or you've got another big centre half besides Ballard to do a bit of just who's been there and done it and got the T-shirt, then I think that's where it comes from. Because I don't think that there's much else you can do in that situation because of the way that we play and we try to make it expansive. But yeah, there's a little bit of naivety in there of would someone, whether it have been a more experienced right back, whether it have been a centre midfielder, have said, listen, we haven't secured possession of the ball. You can't be out on the touchline. I'm exaggerating. He wasn't that far out wide. But someone to tell him that, I think would be essential, whether that's a goalkeeper, whether that's a centre half, whether it's a centre mid. I just think someone who's been there, done it and seen that situation 20,000 times instead of 100 times makes a massive difference.
On the flip side, just to kind of give a bit of balance, I've just looked at the first 12 games last season when Danny Bart played almost all of them. We had 5 clean sheets in 12, so only one better. So maybe Sunderland are just really crap at defending no matter who we put there. So who knows? We'll move on to listeners' questions. Quick fire a little bit because there's a few quite good ones, to be honest. We have one here from Tim, which I think is good, which I think is worth bringing up. Are we getting enough from Roberts? I think he's a fantastic talent. I love watching him dribble, so do I. However, I'm not seeing any end product in assists or goals. I kind of agree, if I'm honest with you. Like, I love watching Patrick Roberts. He's one of my favourite players. Like, I just think his talent with the ball at his feet's unbelievable. But even yesterday, he spun a lad and you just think, oh my God, how's he done that? That looks incredible. And then got the assist wrong. This season, he's played 10 games. He's got no goals. He's got no assists. Kind of speaks volumes. Last year, he got 5 goals and 7 assists, which I don't think is too bad. But this season, he hasn't got a goal or an assist. I'll pass it to you as well, Dave, because, like, look, doesn't mean my opinions doesn't mean I'm right, but I suppose it's a solid question to ask, isn't
it? Yeah, massively. You take it for granted at the time, don't you? And again, I keep saying I'm not trying to get hung up on former glories, but I wonder how many of Patrick Roberts' assists last year were give the ball 7 yards to Amad Diallo and then he puts one in the top corner. I suspect there was actually probably quite a few of them. And I've never really looked at it like that before. Which again, and this is a huge statement, but Diallo going, we knew we needed to replace him as well as you can do, because I think it's a freak that the bloke played championship football for a season, if I'm honest. Yeah, that could be something to do with it. Have we slightly tweaked our style a little bit? Yeah, but we've gone from thinking that we isolate Jack Clark out his own so he can get one-on-one. Jack Clark's still doing it, is he? He's still getting the assist. He's still getting the goals. So, yeah, very frustrating. And I'm not quite sure why the assists aren't ticking for him. Maybe his decision-making slightly off and stuff. Is there a little bit of head turn because the likes of Southampton were after him? Who knows? But it's certainly not coming off from him. And I'm a huge fan of Patrick Roberts. I think he's absolutely brilliant.
You were gonna say I'm a huge fan of Fat Rick Roberts there, weren't you? Me too. Like I love him. He's one of the most talented footballers I've ever seen at Sunderland. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, it doesn't matter how many flashy turns and skills and stuff you do, and you look like a magician. If you're not putting any assists or goals on the board, then I don't know. I'm only looking really quickly at his assists and stuff there, and the ones he's got. I would be interested to see how many assists he has. 2 assists, like how many key passes he's kind of created and stuff like that. That might tell a bit more of a tale. But I do think, and I do kind of agree with him there, that we're probably not getting enough from him in terms of just assists and goals, because he hasn't got any this season, so you can't really disagree with it. One from Connor: has Mowbray reached his ceiling and struggling from overachieving last season? Ooh, good question. That. What do you think?
I had quite a few people when Mowbray took over excited by the appointment. I think it was safe to say me and you weren't the most excited over it. he certainly gave us a good ride last year, and done wonders for the restrictions that he had on him based on injuries. I don't think he's, which is very hypocritical of me because I had us going up as second this year, and it might still happen. To be fair, you know, there is still a chance out there. I think Leicester are going to run away with it. I can understand why you'd say that. I don't. He doesn't inspire me with enough confidence going into, if you needed a must-win against a Millwall in the semi-final of a playoffs. Do I think he's got enough in the locker tactically to get us the win? I don't necessarily think he does. So, depending on what we think the ceiling is, we're still in the playoffs at the minute. Obviously, we've still got quite a big bit of the season to go. But yeah, I don't think he will solidify us comfortably as promotion contenders. Does that mean he's not worth sticking around for? I suspect he's probably got the rest of this season to have a good run at it. But I do think if he gets to the end of this season and we haven't gotten in the playoffs, yeah, I think if he doesn't get us in the playoffs, I think his tenure would be up at Sunderland, to be fair, just based on the fact that I think they'd want to see progression. And if he doesn't get into the playoffs, and again, we're really early, I'm not being cynical here whatsoever, but if we don't make the playoffs, then I think they would probably try a different direction and try someone else, if I'm honest. I'm
going to not agree with you, but I'm going to say, like, at this moment in time in October, I'm going to reserve judgment till the end of the season. I think no matter what happens over the next however many months, I think he deserves the season to have a bit of a shot. I can understand the worry, but like, football's one of those things, isn't it? I think he's probably overachieved with the team last season. And I think we always said that would add extra pressure to the team itself and, you know, the manager, because expectations have risen. At the minute, he's got a sixth, so he's no further ahead, no further behind than he was at the back end of last season. And he's got a number of months in a January transfer window to try and make that better. Another question, let's have a look. A lot of people just asking why there's been no striker. I don't know. Do you need any guests? Well, evidently, yes. At the minute, yes. Question from Bowers is quite good. Are we sometimes too idealistic in the way we approach games? Do we not need to learn to win more ugly at times, like Norwich away, for example? Yeah, I think we do. I think there's no way to get a promotion, be it via the playoffs or automatic, or to have a good season without having some games where you just have a shitty, stupid 1-0 win. And I think ideally, Sunderland, the way that we would play, that doesn't happen that often. We are more likely to pull out a slick 3-0 win or get dicked 1-0 off Cardiff at home. I don't think it's so much that we don't want to win ugly. I think it's we don't know how to win ugly. I don't think Mowbray probably goes into the game saying, right, we need to win in this way, and then we can't. I think Mowbray just doesn't really know, or the team don't really know the ways to win. And that's just down, again, I've said this word before, I think it's just experience. Like, I think, was it Equa that said after the Southampton game that he said, look, it's like playing in the backyard with all my mates, or playing with my school friends. I'm just enjoying myself. And you can quite clearly see the team play like that. But like, if you were coming up against a bunch of like young players that want to like be exciting and play football and have fun, and you're going to kick them, one of the first times to come up against that. And the only thing we're going to improve and get better at winning ugly, I think, is by probably suffering defeats like this on occasional basis and pick occasional basis. Doesn't make sense. On an occasional basis. And I think that's probably the only way forward. I don't think we're too idealistic in approaching it. I just don't think we know any other way to play it. So in a sense, yes, we are, but I don't think it's a purposeful thing. I think it's just, again, down to experience. I think that's really, really tough. A couple of questions I wanted to ask about the Leicester game, because we've got about sort of 5 minutes or whatever till Zoom tells me that I need to pay for it, and I'm not doing that. I don't like doing this podcast that much. So, look, you need a win, and then you say, right, who we got? Oh, no, Leicester away. It's the toughest game of the season, without a doubt. Like, their team's a Premier League team in every way, shape, size and form. How do we navigate the game, Dave, to make sure we come out with a result? And again, I'm making you the next on the manager if you know the actual answer to it. But from a fan perspective, like, how do we navigate the game during the week to ensure we get something from it?
Yeah, I think exactly, just reiterating what you've just said. I don't think anybody should get their hopes up in the fact that we're going to change the way that we play, because it's not going to happen. That's the type of players that we've got in the squad, and that's what we're going to have to contend with. I mean, it's not all doom and gloom, is it? Because the way we try to play football is nice. It's pretty. It's as Bowser said, idealistic. As a really famous, brilliant Northeast manager once said, it's actually football, yeah? Yeah, Alan Shearer didn't like him, did he? I loved him, personally. Yeah, where can you change it? You've said Sealt comes across like a big, huge, imposing figure. Do I think for a damn second that Tony Mowbray is going to put Sealt against Jamie Vardy or Kelechi Iheanacho? Absolutely no danger whatsoever. I tell you who I wouldn't have minded playing centre-half against either of them two. Danny Bart. But, I'm not hanging on to former glories. That's the third time I've said it now. So you can name the podcast that. No former glories here. I miss you, Ross. Ross, I miss you. Stop it. Yeah, if Leicester are naive, give us too much respect. It would not shock me one little bit if we went and won 2-0. However, the firepower that they have, they went 1-0 down to Swansea yesterday. I fully expect that we will get beat. And that just means it's a bit of a free hit. I don't think we'll draw. I don't think we've got draws in the locker, really. I think we either win or get beat all season. So, yeah, interesting. I'm not too optimistic. But at the same time, I'm also not going to cry my eyes out if we get beat.
Yeah, and you know what? I wanted to ask that in a way, like, because you're saying like, oh God, like Leicester. Look, did you see Leicester's starting lineup yesterday? I looked through it and I was like, there's absolutely no chance that they're like a championship team. That had James Justin, England international, at left back, Jamie Vardy up front, Harry Winks in midfield, and Ndidi, Vestergaard at the back, Dewsbury Hall. On the bench, they had Connor Cody, Kelechi Iheanacho, Mark Albrighton, Harry Suter, Patson Dagger, and Hamza Chowdhury on the bench. And I was
I genuinely reckon like Connor Cody is still probably, and we all know how good old Nord Southgate is, he's never going to pick him. But I still think Connor Cody is about the 5th best centre-half in the country.
I think he's the 5th best English centre-half, yes.
Yeah, I totally agree, yeah.
Like, and I mean, they've got an abundance of riches, right? But they're going to be overwhelming favourites. We're already talking about the players that they've got and stuff like that. So, final question on it. With us being outsiders to win the game, is it a bit of a free hit? Does the fact that there's no pressure on us mean that we could turn up and just play the way we want to play? And, you never know.
Completely. I think Southampton, I think a lot of people will have looked at Southampton game and thought, yeah, this could be a bit of a struggle. Do I think it'll be a free hit? Yes. It's like the Southampton game, isn't it? Where the footballing gods decided it'd be our day and we all had a fantastic day out and we absolutely smashed them. The same could be said here. It's tough when you've just mentioned all the names that you've got there. You're like, how on earth are you playing championship football? It's absolutely mad to think that. I mean, Iheanacho coming up. How much did Leicester pay for Iheanacho back in the day? And it was only so. It's absolutely crazy, isn't it? It might well be, but I think we've now got a level. A lot of us as fans have got a level of understanding of where we're at. Mm-hmm. If we get beat, it's not the end of the world. there's part of me, and it's the optimist in me. Never thought I'd say I was optimistic as a Sunderland fan, but we do normally bounce back from a little bit of adversity. We haven't had too much adversity realistically in the last couple of seasons, but we said when we got beat 5-1 off Stoke, like, let's play a Lugo 9 up top, let's change it about a little bit. And we were completely right. Oh, no, we didn't do that, and we still got in the playoffs. So I think they've earned a little bit of trust. That's Mowbray as well. I think they've earned a little bit of trust, and let's see how we get on. Completely agree with you. It is a massive free hit.
Yeah, I agree with you on the credit in the bank as well. I think the players and the management, the reason we've been so positive for most of the season and most of the time that the players have been here is because they've shown they can, for as young as they are, that they are quite good in adversity and they don't let us down for much longer than 3 or 4 games at a max. So fair play, onwards and upwards. If we lose, it's no big deal. It is Leicester. They've got an abundance of riches and parachute payments, but let's just have a crack at it. But thanks for joining me, Dave. Let's hope it's more positive next week.
Absolute pleasure, mate. And onwards and upwards.
Subscribe.